from the cloud. Here we go. Hi, everybody. This is Chaya Parkoff, and coming to you from the Jewish experience, coming to you from my home, because it's, coronavirus pandemic. It is February 24th, 2021. It is the 12th of Adar. Tomorrow is Ta'anit Esther. I guess for my student that is in England, it is already Ta'anit Esther. Well, no, it's tomorrow morning actually for me also. So it's only nighttime by you. And I apologize for my lighting today. For some reason, I can't seem to get lighting quite right. So I look very dark. Not sure why. Okay, so it's the 12th of Adar, 5781. Purim is on Erev Shabbat on this Friday, and it's very exciting. Purim is going to be the holiday that is that's left when the world emerges to the truth of that there is a creator and sustainer of the world, that Hashem runs the universe, that we're all intricately I can't even think of the word today, intrinsically connected, and recognizing that oneness. And when we do that, that's Purim will be here, will be the one that's left. So we are in the book Rebel in Emunah, and we are, we continue to delve in week after week into this book and learning what the basic fundamental principles of Judaism are and how they are. This is the basis for an unshakable foundation for trust in God. And we are finally, we've been in the overview all the way up until here. Our last section was really about imagination and being very careful about our imagination and how it can fool us very often. And we have to just know that, and to instead to be able to access a higher, more divine level of understanding, and to really look from a rational point of view how things are, not just from our emotional. That's not to say everything is about being, that everything you have to be rational. It's more of using the intellect to understand rather than going with our imagination, because our imagination is all tied up with our emotions. So last week we started the first tenet, and we talked about the generation of the dispersion. This is my favorite part. We talked about the generation of the dispersion, the Dor Haflaga. Funny sidebar. I'll tell you, somebody, we were having a gardening discussion before we went on record. I'll ask after. I'll answer that question after. So we talked about the generation of the flood, and how their whole the Dor Haflaga, the generation of the dispersion, which was the Tower of Babel story, and how Bavel, that's the word in Hebrew, and how the people all wanted to unite together to build a tower so that they could basically compete with God. And they all rallied around together to in unison for this one cause, which was to try to compete with God. And what we learned about was that when it comes to unity, the only thing that it's possible for, that God set it up after that situation, and set it up so that the only thing that we could all rally around in unison was the oneness of God. That rallying around an idea such as competing with God, or pick a topic, pick a cause, right? That, it's never going to happen, because, and that's why God changed all the languages and made everybody not understand each other, because he didn't want, it would not be good for humanity for people to rally around this idea of competing with God. It wasn't a pure cause, and it wasn't in sync with how Hashem designed the world. And he designed the world in a way that we can function to our most efficient, most effective selves. And he gave us a manual to use to navigate through this life, and that is the Torah. So it helped, and I shared last week that it helped me to really, when I learned this, it really gave me like a lot of relief, because it's so easy to look at the world and say, like, how could people be so, so argue about so many different things, how people cannot agree. How can it be that half the country can think one thing and half the country can think another thing? Or people in families cannot agree, and people in marriages, or like, why is it that causes that are so passionate to some are not passionate for others, others are not passionate about, or vice versa? What is it that makes it, how do we accept that? And then when I learned about this concept, when I learned this book with my teacher, that we can only truly unify around one thing and one thing only, and that is God, and that Hashem is one. There is only this unity of God. There's only oneness in the world. We actually come from that oneness. We are an expression of that oneness. We'll get much deeper into this, but it was really very comforting to me. I don't get stressed out. Bless you, whoever sneezed. I'll go ahead and mute so we don't get more sneezes, but feel free to unmute yourself at any time to ask a question or make a comment. So, he said, he says they miscalculated the scenario of unity and human harmony that they envisioned could have, so to speak, forced their will on God, but they miscalculated because there's no tower in the world that can unite man independent of God. Okay. People cannot unite together all as one independent of God. It's brilliant. It's amazing. When Hashem declared, let us descend and jumble their language so that they will not comprehend each other's languages, he revealed that true unity among people is not possible if it centers on something physical. If mankind wants to strive for unity, it is achievable only by turning to the one above and accepting his sovereignty. Everything that originates here in the physical world is inherently divided and separated. Around a tower that is part of the physical world, unity of the global village is not attainable. So maybe I'll say it differently. It's not that the only thing that people can rally around is that Hashem is one. It's that rallying around any idea that is physical, that is, I guess we have to think about this. Maybe it is really this acknowledging the oneness of Hashem, acknowledging the sovereignty. You can't separate them out. This is the whole. So we also talked about last week that the Rambam said there was discussion, and the Rambam said as well, that there really is only one principle, one tenet, and that is the unity of God. Everything is part of that unity. The other 12 of the 13 principles are kind of derivations or ways to explain aspects of this oneness. So really, truly, it is what I said earlier, which is that has to be what people rally around. Anything physical, a physical thing that is not going to be something that people can all have unity around. Unity has to start from where everything starts, the source of everything. And the source of all sources is this first one, right? The source of all sources is the actual, says, I believe without reservation that the Creator, blessed is his name, creates and guides all of creation, and that he alone made, makes, and will make everything. There's just this oneness. Yeah. Okay. I want to make a comment about this. How different this rallying around a sovereign feels different when there's a monarchy in the country and there's not. So this is such a good point. So one of our listeners and attenders, weekly attenders, is from England, Britain, and Great Britain. I don't know what you call yourselves all of the now with all these Brexits and all this, but Great Britain, and they have a monarch. In fact, I'm in the middle of watching The Crown, which is, by the way, very fascinating. And it's very, very interesting, which then got me wanting to read a book on Churchill and the Jews, because Churchill was very supportive of the Jews. Anyway, sidebar. So you get a monarchy. You get what it means to have, obviously it's different than God. We're talking about monarchy in people, but when a society has something, has a monarchy, there is a level of understanding of going before the king, of listening to the king, that the king or the queen, in this case, the queen, they make the rule, and what they say goes. And this understanding of like, it's different, obviously, because that's people, and we're not, and the kingship, even in Judaism, was very different than monarchy as it is, as we know it in terms of history. But in Jewish history, the way kingship worked was very, very different. But at least it gives you this understanding, right? Or this concept. Whereas, for those of us that live in the United States, there's kind of like no one's in charge. There's no sense of authority, defund the police. I don't think that personally, but I'm saying this is what people are saying, and that, there's just a lack of, seeing anything as the maker of rules or having to abide by them. So it is a sense, I think, that people that live in with an establishment like that have a little bit of a clue. Okay. So the Beis HaMikdash, a vehicle for unity. So so they wanted to build this tower, which they wanted all rally around, and that was nixed by Hashem, said this was not going to be a good situation for them, for people at all. And so that was made impossible to happen. But what Hashem did, what we do have is the temple, the holy temple, which is a vehicle for unity. Jews from all over would come up to Jerusalem, to the temple. What's standing left of it is the outer wall on the western side, the Kotel, the western wall. That's what's left for now. Please God, we will see the rebuilding. The third temple will be rebuilt very soon. But this was historically a vehicle for unity. So we're going to learn about that now. So Chazal are the sages, okay? Chachamim Zichron Livracha, the sages of blessed memory, because they're all gone, say that the city that the generation of the dispersion wanted to build was modeled after the city of Zion, and the tower was patterned after the Beis HaMikdash. So this is at the end of Parshas Noach, at the end of the story of Noah in the Torah. The Zohar speaks about this. This is hinted at the verse from Shir HaShirim, your neck is like the Tower of David. Chazal reveal that this is an allusion to the Beis HaMikdash. These people understood that the Beis HaMikdash, the temple, has the power to unite the Jewish nation in its ability to worship God. The evil intention of that generation was to create a substitute and to unite the people in their common goal of rebelling against Hashem, right? So they wanted to build something, and the point was to rebel against, whereas the temple is something that brought people in general together, but Jews specifically together. And I can attest to this. Maybe those of you that are listening can as well, or watching. you know, I've been to, thank God, been to Israel several times, and to have the experience of going on Friday night to the Kotel for Kabbalat Shabbat. And it is absolutely fascinating because there are Jews of every stripe and color and observant, the way they observe, believe, whatever. There is such a diversity there, and they're all dancing together. It's beautiful. It's really, you see this power and the unity that just being in that space can create. The Beis Hamikdash was designed to be a place of gathering where the entire Jewish nation assembled. The Rambam writes, when he introduces the mitzvah of building the Beis Hamikdash, which we've been talking about in the lately, that it should be a dwelling place for Hashem, where we bring the sacrifices and celebrate the 3 festivals of the year. This was the place where the entire nation gathered to celebrate together. Indeed, the Gemara tells us that the Beis Hamikdash was a place where the entire Jewish nation passed through one gate, right? Symbolizing the oneness of us as a nation and the oneness of Hashem. This gathering of the nation created a remarkable situation in which even the ignorant people, Amei Haaretz, were believed regarding the purity of their truma, just like a Talmud Chacham. So let me explain what that is. So people would bring sacrifices, and, you know, someone who maybe wasn't as learned, you'd be a little cautious, like, is it really, has it been done properly? And, but they're saying that the unity, so people were like suspicious of other people. The unity was such that even someone who was so simple and really wasn't learned, nobody questioned the quality of it. Which, and the saying, which is not the usual case. This halachic exception to the rule was based on the verse, then all the people from Shoftim, then all the people of Israel gathered together at the city as one man, as comrades, right? Like when we received the Torah at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai, it says we were Ish Echad Lev Echad, one man, human, one heart. We're like one, which actually the rabbi that is possibly going to be the rabbi in the shul I go to was giving a class last night. He was talking about Purim, and he was talking about Purim and how Purim, we read the Megillah. Here's a little Purim Torah, which I wasn't expecting to share, but here we go. Because Purim is coming, right? Tomorrow's Tanit Esther, and then which goes tomorrow night is Purim. We read the Megillah once at night, and then once in the morning. We have to hear them both times. And one of the things he discussed was one of the reasons for reading it both times is to understand the dichotomy, the 2 faces of Purim, so to speak, that on the one hand, there was this incredible joy and incredible, revelation and seeing God reveal himself in the blink of an eye. On the other hand, there was also a lot of challenges, and it was a long time that this went over. This is not a short period of time, even though it's only a day for us. It was, I think, 13 years or something between certain parts, and the kind of the vulnerability that causes, right? That things can be so bad, things can be so good, that we're just really vulnerable. So he was talking about vulnerability and some of the benefits of vulnerability. And one of the benefits was this seeing that we're all in this together and caring about each other in a way that we feel like one person, right? One person, like the story of the man who takes his wife to the doctor because she has a broken finger, and the doctor says, "What's wrong?" And he says, "Our finger hurt." hurts, our finger hurts, right? That we should feel that way with certainly all of Am Yisrael, all of the Jewish people, and really, and I think Jews express this a lot in the way we act when there are challenges in the world, is to see that everyone is part of us, that we are all connected. And when one part of the country or the world is hurting, we all hurt for that. We should feel that pain. So, so that's what he's saying here in Shoftim, that and so this also happened when they would go to the Beis Hamikdash for the holidays, as they would feel this oneness like they did when they received the Torah. The Gemara in Chagiga teaches that when all of the Jewish people gathered together, they are all chaverim, learned people. The entire nation coming to the Beis Hamikdash became one. So we are one nation. The generation of the dispersion, the Tower of Babel generation, wanted to make a tower that would unify everyone. What emerged, however, was the truth that unity can only come about when it expresses the glory of the one above. Harmony in the world below. So this goes to the understanding that everything, this world that we're in right now is a physical manifestation, is a physical expression of the world above, that there is a mechitza, there is a imaginary, there's above, as we talk about tachat, hashechina, and above the sun, tachat hashemet, above the sun, below the sun, that the things below the sun are the things that happen down here, above the sun are the thing that happen up there, and that it's a mirror for each other, that there is a parallel going on. So harmony in the world below is only possible if it is directed to unifying everyone through the acceptance of Hashem's oneness. But if the people are not joining together around the only being that is truly one, then they are automatically divided. That is why Hashem scattered the generation of the dispersion over the entire earth. They were then distanced from the true existence, which is one and unified. So they completely had to be, that was the consequence of their initial drive. Hold on, I'm just going to plug my computer in because we are running out of power. There we go. Okay. Unity in the world will only come about with the merging of everything with God's oneness. Okay, this is the main principle. Cleaving to his existence enables the world to become one entity. Any human being who does not connect to Hashem's being becomes irrelevant. He vanishes in the end because he's not part of this soul existence that comes from Hashem. Any attempt to create a reality that is independent of God's will only aids destruction. Because we're either building or destroying. We're creators or, God forbid, destroyers. There is this place of kind of being in a survival mechanism, but survivor mode is all about fulfilling self, which for the self is destruction. Okay, because for the self to emerge, the self has to attach itself to the oneness that allows self to be self. Does this make sense? Our self is only possible because we are an expression of that oneness. And so when we don't attach ourselves to that oneness, or we, God forbid, deny that we're part of that oneness, we're denying self. It's like, it doesn't behoove us to not tap into the source that is allowing us to be. Okay.
Okay, unity in the world will only come about with the merging of everything with God's oneness. Cleaving to his existence enables the world to become one entity. Any human being who does not connect to Hashem's being becomes irrelevant. Okay, I've read this. Any attempt to create a reality that is independent of God's will only aids to destruction. It's like adding another floor to a building in a precarious state. It will only cause it to fall harder. So if we can think of this as the foundation, which is the principles, the tenets, what everything rests on, is this, and this is the one of all the 13. This is the one, and then the other 12, as I said, are kind of details about the 13 aspects of the one, excuse me. So the 12 are aspects of the one. They're all from the one, the first tenet, which is this unity. And so to build a tower, if you will, without the foundation, and then trying to add a floor, it's just going to fall, and even harder. Unity of self, a key to life. The scattering of the generation of the dispersion was just the beginning of their undoing. This is because a person loses his place in the world when he loses his unique being, his unity of self. This is like what I was just saying. Even though he continues to exist, he is essentially a being of different parts. You're not integrated. You're not, you're just kind of like running on your own energy system. Hang on a minute. I'm just getting off this so it doesn't make noise. My WhatsApp keeps dinging. Even though he continues to exist, he is essentially a being of different parts. Only when a person exists because he fills God's will is he part of the unified existence, and then he himself is one. So ladies, this is really giving us a directive as to how we should live life, right? That life, our task is to try to fulfill God's will. Now, to be able to fulfill God's will, you have to know what God's will is, right? You have to know, where do we find out what God's will is? Right in the Torah, right? It tells us, and there's, he did give man the ability to try to make sense of the oral law, and that was all discussions and lots of riddles and puzzles and trying to figure things out and understanding. And so there's lots of different ways to understand, and that's why it's so important to attach yourself to a teacher, a rabbi, a mentor who attaches themselves to the truth and attaches themselves and lives that way, that they want to fulfill Hashem's will, and that the Torah is sweet, and that they emulate it in their own life. This is so important because it is easy to listen to some people who maybe aren't representing it the way it really is meant to be given to us. This concept is reflected in the principle of what the Gemara calls kisosi. I don't know how to pronounce this. Kisosi miktat she'ura. It doesn't give the exact explanation. This means that the measurements, I don't know, I can't read it well, that the measurements of a given object are considered crushed. The principle applies to objects that are forbidden to use and must be destroyed. Therefore, they cannot be used for a mitzvah that calls for an object of a certain size, such as a shofar on Rosh Hashanah and a lulav on Sukkot. Okay, let's say this again. Concept reflecting the principle of what the Gemara calls measurements of a given object that are crushed. The shi'ur, okay, measurements. Okay. The principle applies to objects that are forbidden to use and must be destroyed. So if they're forbidden to use and must be destroyed, they cannot be used for a mitzvah, such as the shofar or the lulav. They are considered to be lacking the necessary size required to fulfill the mitzvah. Since such lulavim and shofaros are supposed to be destroyed, since such luvavim and a shofar or a lulav that is made of these parts that cannot be used, they are meant to be destroyed. They're considered like fragmented pieces that are not attached. This is because something that is meant to be destroyed is considered to have no measurements as of now. Wow, it doesn't even have an existence. I don't remember this part. It is not considered a whole entity, but rather like grains of its basic material. This is not to say that it loses complete identity, only its cohesiveness. The Acharonim make this distinction in order to resolve a seeming contradiction to this principle presented by the prohibition against possessing chametz on Pesach. The halacha, the law, is that in order to transgress the prohibition of owning chametz, one must possess a certain amount of chametz, a kazayas, which is about the size of an egg. Some say an olive, but olives were bigger. Now, since chametz on Pesach is supposed to be destroyed, this principle would seem to be applicable, and the chametz should therefore be considered to be less than the prohibited amount. The Acharonim explain this paradox by noting that there are actually two types of halachic measurements. So you hear how confusing this all can sound and be. One is relevant when we are dealing with an object such as a shofar that must be of a certain size. This is where this principle of the measurement being crushed applies. But there is another type of measurement that is relevant when the issue is only the amount of a substance. Okay, so one measurement has to do with when a certain thing has to be a certain size for it to be used. And then this other measurement has to do with when we're talking about the amount of a substance, regardless of whether it is not one single object. This is true of chametz. As long as one possesses the prohibited amount, he transgresses the prohibition against having chametz on Pesach, even though it's supposed to be destroyed. This is the difference between not existing at all halachically or simply being consigned to destruction. Okay, now it's going to get relevant to what we're talking about. I mean, it is relevant, but it's going to be less cryptic. Belief in God's absolute existence is necessary for a person to have unity of self. Without God willing one to be, the first aspect that is lost is one's ability to merge all parts of his being. This is the first step before he ceases to exist completely. So first, a person will just not be able to merge all their parts of self into one. They won't feel that oneness, I imagine. This is the first step before ceasing to exist. This is the fulfillment of the verse in Tehillim, in Psalms, your enemies shall perish, all doers of iniquity shall be dispersed. Their diffusion is the beginning of their destruction. Without believing in God's oneness, a person himself cannot have a unified being. So it's so interesting because, I work in mental health, right? I'm a therapist, and I most of my clients are middle to very upper ages, and the longer you live, the more life experience you'll have, and I'll tell you, live long enough, and we will tell you the stuff that they have gone through. Wow. And I'm working with a client right now who is up there in years and struggling with some things, and very, very much struggling emotionally. And they were sent to me to try to help a little bit. And they're not religious. They've never really felt, the other people in their family grabbed onto that, but they're not so much. They haven't really developed their God consciousness, if you will, over their lifetime. And, we had a conversation about
at the end of the day, there wasn't a whole lot that was going to help her, except digging there, and that is what my experience has been in working with people in their advanced years is, man, I've worked with, thousands of families now, and everyone has stuff. And the people who feel and can at least express a connection to God, however it might be manifested right now, but to acknowledge that, seem to have more resilience. And you can understand why, and especially when you read this, it's like, because they're less fragmented, right? Because there is this oneness that they're attached to. As Rabbi Shimon Schwab would say, my teacher's grandfather, Rabbi Shimon Schwab of blessed memory, he would say, handcuff yourself to Hashem and throw away the key. Like, just throw away the key. And I think that is a recipe for, mental well-being, because we're anchored in something that's actually real. As going back to last week's discussion, as opposed to imagination, because not acknowledging, what this is teaching us is not acknowledging Hashem's oneness in the world, and that is what we have to attach to in order to experience, really, to feel it, to be truly alive. It's like saying that otherwise we're in imagination. We're not in truth. We're not in the reality. We're not in the mitziut. The mitziut is the reality. The mitziut is that Hashem is the source of everything, and everything is part of this. And our self can only be expressed when we're tethered to that, and it truly be expressed. Okay, so let's see. We have a few more minutes. So let's talk about Avraham. Avraham, lighting up existence. From within the darkness and impurity of the generation of the dispersion, burst forth a beam of light. Avraham Avinu. Okay, so right after this, the Dor HaFlaga. So what happened was, right, I've said, my teacher always says, Judaism was plan B, plan A was humanity. Humanity didn't get it, right? First they didn't listen in the garden. We've discussed the garden is not a place. The garden is a state of mind. The state of mind was, I can make up my own rules. I don't have to listen, right? So they didn't listen. And then they're Cain and Hevel, the children of Adam and Chava, who also is a state of mind. We all have both of those parts of us in us, the Cain and the Hevel, the Cain and the Abel. And that Cain killed Abel, right? Who am I, my brother's keeper? I have to be in charge, right? And it was based on jealousy and all sorts of stuff, and he kills him. Okay, not so good. Humanity not doing so well. Then we had the generation of Noah. Not so good there, right? He has to God says, I'm going to destroy the whole world. I'm just going to save these. And then we've got the Dor HaFlaga, the generation of Babel. And so finally, God says, okay, I'm making up how God says, right? But basically it was like, okay, humanity is not getting it. So I'm going to create a people who will lead this message to the world, or pick a person who can lead this message, and a people that will grow from this person. And that people will be the pioneers, if you will, the Rashis, the first to blossom, to ripen in this message of oneness, and they will be the leader. Okay, they will be the light to the nations, right? That's what the Jewish people are. So he picks Avraham. So after the Dor HaFlaga, burst a beam of light, Avram Avinu, Abraham our father. The prophet Yeshayahu speaks of Hashem inspiring the man from the east, whose every footstep was accompanied by righteousness. This is Avraham.
Abraham rose up to oppose the generation of the dispersion, a generation bent on distancing itself from God, who is the beginning of creation, the source of all creation. As Chazal teach, the Torah alludes to this when it states, V'hi ben soa mikedem, and it came to pass when they migrated from the east, that's from Bereshis, communicating that they traveled from the beginning of the world, meaning God, from the east. Nimrod, the king of this generation, wanted to burn Abraham for declaring the oneness of Hashem, which unifies the whole creation, right? We are all one when you declare this, which is why the Shema is so powerful, because it talks about Hashem is one, and for showing the emptiness of Nimrod's kingship, right? So Nimrod was embarrassed and shown up. Yeshayahu also tells us, look to Abraham, your forefather, and Sarah, who bore you, for he was one when I called him, and I blessed him and made him many. Abraham is called one because he joined himself to the unity of God. This concept is all, so this makes sense because we're talking about that when you attach yourself to that oneness, you can feel integrated. You can feel like one. The parts are not separated from each other. And this is what how he's describing Abraham. Abraham is called one because he joined himself to the unity of God. This concept is also reflected in the Amidah, the silent meditation that we do, the one at Mincha on Shabbos, so the afternoon service on Shabbat, regarding Abraham's descendants. You are one, and your name is one, and who is like your people Israel, one nation on earth? Who is like your people? One nation. The bond to the source that is one is the only path to union, and it is the only way to achieve unity in the world. Going back to what we talked about with the Tower of Babel, right? They were trying to become unified around something totally against God. And what we established was you can only unify when it's attached to God. This is the meaning of the verse, Shema Yisrael, Elokeinu, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. The word Shema is a call to gather, as reflected in the verse, Shaul gathered the people. Vishama Shaul et ha'am. The ability to merge all forces and individuals together is only possible through the belief in one God. Let us recall the wording of the first tenet. I believe, ani ma'amen, without reservation, the Emunah shlema, complete, no reservation, complete, no lack of reservation, that the Creator, blessed is his name, meaning his name should expand. My understanding of his name should expand. Creates and guides all of creation, and that he alone made, makes, and will make everything. Creates and guides is the tower of our belief system. Hashem created us, and we are his city. He is the tower that unites, and the whole of creation clings to him and connects to its source. All of existence revolves around the reality of his existence and will, like a city whose tower is its center, around the reality of his existence and will, like a city whose tower is its center and core. Wow. God created us and we are his city. He is the tower that unites, right? The Tower of Babel was going to be in the middle of the city to unite everyone. So he's saying, we're the city and the tower that unites, and the whole of creation clings to him and connects to its source. This is the power panel, right? The power tower, right? Hashem is the power tower. And we are everything that draws our power
from. I think people in Texas could really appreciate this, right? They had no heat, no electricity, nothing. Why? Because the power panels went down. That source of there wasn't that source. The source was, they weren't attached to the source. So, or at least to understand the metaphor of being disconnected from it, of not feeling part, losing your power because you're not being powered. So this plugging into this tower, this power tower called Hashem, we then have power. And in fact, we're supposed to use this power here in this world. That's what we're supposed to be doing, and be emissaries for Hashem, be ambassadors for Hashem, spread this message of oneness, which makes sense on a mental health, level, when people are feeling so not integrated and disconnected and insecure. Unless their attachment is to the source of all power, it would make sense that somebody would feel anxious. And not that we're not going to feel anxious even if we are, but a fundamental, I could just say from my own experience that as I've developed my relationship with God, and particularly through learning these kinds of, this kind of Torah, meaning these messages from the Torah, from my teacher, Esther Wien, who learned from many, many, many great people, like her grandfather, that my mental well-being has improved like incredible, because fundamentally I know all's well. Fundamentally, I know where I'm connected. And even when I feel not attached or feel disintegrated or feel that's my imagination playing tricks on me, because the truth, the mitziot, is that I am connected, and I keep seeking that connection, and have recognized that. And it's made a big difference in my own mental well-being. Chag Purim Sameach. I wish everybody a beautiful Purim and an easy fast tomorrow, and I'll see you next Wednesday. Bye.